All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Anacortes City Council meeting of June 2nd, 2025. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Franciak, you take the roll, please.
Mr. Fantini.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Present.
Mr. Walters. Here. Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall.
Here.
Ms. Hubick.
Here.
Thank you.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, announcements and committee reports. A couple of announcements from me. First of all, Happy New Month, everybody. But I'm going to start it out with something fun here. Congratulations to Councilmember T.J. Fantini on earning his Certificate of Municipal Leadership from the Association of Washington Cities. The certificate represents over 30 hours of training in 5 core areas: roles, responsibilities, legal requirements, public sector resource management, community planning development, effective local leadership, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And it took me like 6 years to get mine, and he did his in like 2. So congratulations, and I've got a little plaque for you. All right, a couple other announcements. So our city phone system is undergoing an update, so not your phones at home. These are city government phones. The City of Anacortes phone lines will be migrating to Ring Central and undergo planned maintenance on Friday, June 6th. That's this Friday. So there'll be a temporary disruption to service, and cell phones will be the primary point of contact if you need to contact somebody. A departmental cell phone list will be posted on the website for that day. So hopefully it'll just be the weekend, Friday and the rest of the weekend. Speaking of Friday, First Friday Art Walk and Waterfront Festival is this weekend. So the Chamber of Commerce is still seeking volunteers for the festival. Chamber will donate $10 per hour to a nonprofit or fundraiser of your choice for every shift worked. So please contact the Chamber of Commerce to register as a volunteer if you wish to do that. Again, Waterfront Festival is this weekend. All right, Public Works Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. The Public Works Committee met at 5 p.m. today. Councilmember Walters, myself, and Mr. Young also joined us with Public Works Director Andy Rayum and City Engineer Logan Lee. And our focus today was traffic safety. So this is when constituents let us know about things that they feel need to be addressed. A lot of times it's speeding, sometimes it's parking, most of the time it's both. And we had quite a few things on that list. I won't go through every single one, but staff has looked into every one of them and has made some recommendations that they let us know, and some of them they'll do some more research on, and they are to do with parking, crosswalks, speeding, and speeding. So there are different ideas. You know, some of those are putting up signs that say when you're going over, and we do have some portable ones that we deploy in different areas around town for like a month at a time. And so we'll be doing some of those. That's one of the ideas that seems to be pretty effective for about a month after they are used, and also more enforcement. But those are some of the ideas that will be coming to council in very specific instances in the next few meetings or so. So then we'll all get to see the maps and learn about those and make some decisions. Thank you.
Great. Any other announcements or committee reports I may have missed? All right, we're moving on to item 4, which is public comment. I didn't have anybody sign up in advance, but is there any member of the public wishing to address the council, anything not on our agenda? This would be the time to do it. And check online. Okay, we are going on to item 5, which is our consent agenda, items A, B, and C. Council.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
I move to approve consent agenda items 5A through C.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Ms. Hubick to approve the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item 6, other business. And first up, we have some guests here that Ms. Shu's going to introduce. And I wish that I remember. Yeah, you're ready to go. I was hoping to bring out a placard for one of our guests to put back up here on council. I know she wished she was still sitting next to me, or at least one seat down. But anyway, Ms. Shu.
Thank you. Mayor, council, members of the audience, tonight I'm pleased to welcome Senator Liz Lovelett and Representative Alex Ramo, who represent Washington's 40th Legislative District, which includes Anacortes. They're known for championing climate action, affordable housing, and environmental protection. Senator Lovelett is a former city council member here in Anacortes, and she focuses on ferry system improvements, clean energy, and housing access. Representative Ramo, with a background in environmental policy and community energy program, leads on legislation to reduce fossil fuel dependence and promote energy efficiency. And I did want to mention that Representative Deborah Lekanoff extends her condolences for not being able to attend tonight. But we are pleased that Senator Lovelett and Representative Ramo are joining us to share how their actions in Olympia align with Anacortes' legislative priorities. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you and welcome. And I don't know how you want to do this, but I think I may have said something that we look like we still have 2.5 hours of agenda items after you all, so.
Well, believe it or not, we can actually be
All right.
timely.
I know.
We'll do our best.
All right, thank you, Senator.
Well, hi, everybody. It's so great to see everybody's faces, and hi to the people watching at home. Sorry in advance to Councilmember Hubick for having to retread everything that she already knows so well. Believe it or not, I'm actually at the point now where I have served in the legislature for 2 years longer than I served on the city council, which seems like quite a long time coming, but here we are. So a couple of things to just share as it relates to City of Anacortes issues, not necessarily specific to you or your legislative agenda, but policies that we worked on in the landscape of what was certainly in our tenure the most challenging budget session that we had ever experienced. Many of our colleagues served during the Great Recession and didn't have the tools available to them to enact some new revenue policies, and that left them slashing social services, slashing Medicare benefits. It was a very dark time, and so in this legislative session we made some steps forward on some progressive revenue concepts in order to help balance things like our K-12 budget, like our ability to invest in transportation projects here locally, and to fulfill our obligations to our state employees, among a host of other things. So we've been back about a month now. The governor has signed everything that he's going to sign into law, and 2 of the bills that I worked on that will have some kind of direct bearing on City of Anacortes, actually I got some help from Councilmember Walters, some good input on, has to do with subdividing small lots that are being used for middle housing. So say, for example, you develop a duplex or even up to a 6-plex. We're updating the unit lot subdivision process. So instead of having to have an HOA around who owns the dirt and everybody has the condo unit of their building, we're going to be able to do 0 lot line subdivisions that will allow for people to own their whole parcels. So the idea here is we really want to ensure that there are more opportunities for home ownership in our communities. And as I know right now, you guys are working hard digging in on the comprehensive plan process, which I loved being a part of that now a decade ago when I was serving on the council, where we did some really visionary work, and many of the people sitting here, Mayor Miller and others, were here during that time doing that work. And this year, I'm really excited to have added, based on some policies that I worked on with Representative Davina Dewar, having a climate change element that will be required. And that's going to be things like really improving our transportation plan so that we are reducing as many of our greenhouse gas emissions as possible by reducing trip and improving transit, but also really thinking about the density of our housing, which is, of course, especially important when you're on an island and those last parcels of land are becoming fewer and fewer, and we're going to need to densify in our core, which we laid out for our urban R4 area, and we're starting to see those kinds of developments. And I just want to give you guys a nod because around the state, I think you guys are developing an enviable amount of multifamily housing that is not being realized in other places. And that's because we did such a great job on the last comp plan, and then importantly, updated those development regulations so that you're actually seeing the patterns of development that you really want to on the ground, so that everybody who is working in our community has the ability to live in our community and to provide more opportunities for seniors to age in place. I'll just finish off by touching on the big recycling bill, Senate Bill 5284, which was many, many years in the making and establishes an extended producer responsibility organization that will be regulated by Department of Ecology so that the main companies that are producing the waste that then the municipal governments and the consumer have to deal with disposing of are going to be rebuilding and reimagining how they can do their packaging in a way that will make it so that we have a robust recycling system, that it is available curbside to every Washingtonian who already has garbage service, and that cost, up to 90% of that cost, will be removed from the ledgers of the city and also from our residents. This was a lot of work in stakeholdering, and I'm really proud that by the end we had done some really significant exemptions, making sure that we're not having any undue impact on the cost of food or construction materials. We also did some really great provisions around having good communication strategy and cultural competency, not just language access, but making sure that we're engaging with community-based organizations to be messengers in their community and create that intergenerational change, and made sure that we have accountability in terms of those cost savings being passed on to cities and to consumers. And at the end, all of these companies were in for it. I mean, it was kind of amazing. We had Ameripen, which is the company that actually makes all of the products that you put shampoo and laundry detergent and all of that into, but down to Walmart, Costco, Nestle, Coca-Cola. They want to be able to create this marketplace that aligns us with the rest of the West Coast. And so over these next few years, they're going to be working on developing the plan and rolling it out. With that, I'm sure I'm over my 5, so I'm going to pass it over to Alex.
Thanks, Vice. Thanks. And I really appreciate the forum to come and sort of report back to you all on how our legislative session went. Part of what we try to do here by showing up together, and if Deborah were in town, she would be here. Part of what we try to do is just really showcase that we work together as a team to represent the community. So reporting back on a few of the things that we heard in the lead up to the legislative session from you all, from the mayor, from members of the community. Housing remains a top priority and one of the biggest challenges that we're facing. This year, we made the largest investment in the Housing Trust Fund that Washington has ever made. That's the funds that the state puts in to support local projects in affordable housing, permanent supportive housing, permanently affordable home ownership, and everything across that continuum. I was able to pass a bill this year on multifamily tax exemption. It is, I will admit, a little bit on the boring side. Really, I think of it's a good governance bill. That's a program that's working in a lot of places. I know Anacortes has been contemplating utilizing that tool. I would say we touched it up so that we know that the reporting elements are there, so that we know that the program is working the way that it's supposed to when we're investing to get those affordable units, so that the community knows that those benefits are happening, so that the state has mechanisms to track it. I think in the long term, this is just going to help a tool that's already working work just a little bit better, and I'm always happy to sit down and talk with folks more if you want to learn more of the boring details. We also got an exciting bill on self-certification for accessory dwelling units. Self-certification is an idea that an architect can bring forward a plan and self-certify that it meets the building code. So it takes a step out of that permit review process. This is an option that cities will have, so you can choose to implement this program. There would be, a random audit to make sure that it's working. And then in the end, there's still an inspection so that we know that there'll be somebody who goes there, and if there's a problem that's found, then the architect who self-certified and made the mistake is the one on the hook for it. We've heard in other states that this is dramatically reducing permit times, and we thought accessory dwelling units and an optional program would be a great way to test that idea out, and that's an option that's on the table for cities to implement in the future. I'm also really excited to report back that we got rent stabilization across the finish line this year. So for all of our tenants who've seen excessive rent increases over the years, just want to get that message out there that help is on the way. That new rule has gone into effect, and rent increases above 10% will not be allowed in most cases across Washington now. I think that's a well-struck compromise, and excited to see that finally take effect to protect some of our most vulnerable citizens. Just moving down the line, one of the other things we hear about routinely is our ferry system. I will say in a tough budget year, our biggest challenge was holding the line on the investments that were kind of already in the plan, but where the money hasn't been spent, and there's dozens of other things pulling on those dollars, trying to find other things that could be spent on. So we've maintained the investments in our ferry workforce, which is really why we're starting to see improvements in the quality of ferry service and the timeliness of ferry service because of the workforce. In the long term, though, we absolutely have to continue to invest in building new boats. You probably have read we have money set aside. We were hoping it was going to be enough to get us 5 new vessels. We held on to that, but the bids have come back, and they're going to be more expensive than anticipated. So it's in front of the governor and the ferry service right now, but we think we have at least enough to get 3 vessels under construction. And then we were also able to maintain it is less exciting here, but very important in the San Juan Islands, and folks traveling to the San Juan Islands, we were able to maintain the investment in that additional shift for the inner island, which was a big part of improving the attractiveness of that service for the workers. So we've had a hard time getting workers who wanted to go out there when there weren't 3 shifts year round. And so adding that 3rd shift has been a big improvement. That's been protected. One other option I'll just mention, I know it's been front of mind here for some time. We were able to, at the governor's urging, put $100 million into the budget for grants for public safety. And that gets paired with a new program that's a new option for local sales tax. That money can be used on traditional law enforcement. It can also be used on alternative response, supportive programs, rehabilitation, et cetera. So the idea is the state has some money to kind of kickstart things, and we're giving local governments additional tools to be able to invest long-term in ongoing support for the public safety system. And last, I'll just mention a couple of things we did not get across the finish line that I know are important to you all, and that I just want to reaffirm our continued commitment to working on. We had a bill in front of us. It's been something that's been there every year since I've been up, to increase local government's authority for levy from 1% per year to count-o-matically 3%. I thought we had a chance to get that across the finish line, and ultimately the governor said that he was going to veto the bill if that was not included, so we were not able to advance that proposal. I'll tell you that I intend to continue working on that. I understand how that impacts budgets, and how when the growth in the levy is behind inflation every single year in real dollars, your budget shrinks every year. And that's just not a formula for sustainability. We had a proposal for a local option for a real estate excise tax that would have given local governments another tool in the toolbox for affordable housing. That did not get across the finish line, but we'll be back and trying again on that one next year. And then finally, locally, I know there was a lot of excitement about Event Center in a proposal to try and get that into the capital budget. What I will say is that our capital budget this year was really focused, and both sides, both chambers really were focused on how do we finish projects that we've already got the ball rolling on, and where we need to make those investments. So for example, Western State Hospital has been something we've paid on every year since I've been in the legislature. I think we just wrote the last 250 million something check on that one in this budget, and that should be done and behind us. So in the future, hope to be able to say yes to proposals like that one. So probably a little more than 5 minutes, but hopefully not enough to get the hook out. Happy to take any questions.
It wasn't an hour. It was very good and succinct. I
We didn't
appreciate
even
that.
mention the school stuff, so
Well-
we'll have more.
There's a school board in town for that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I do appreciate the update, and I appreciate you hosting our team when we came down there. I know I wasn't able to get into your office, Senator, but again, appreciate you hosting it, and of course, listening to us throughout the legislative session. So with that, I guess I'll open it up for any questions from council. Don't need, again, I think, go. Yeah,
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking time to be here in person. This is great having you here, and for all this really good information. And I just want to talk briefly about the Recycling Reform Act, of course. Senator Lovelet, great job. I know it was a huge lift. And I just wanted to mention a couple things about that that are going to be great for us statewide. Is one, there will be a statewide list of recyclables. So wherever town, whatever county you're in, the same things will be recyclable, and that information will be disseminated everywhere, so there's no confusion about what you can recycle. And one of my other favorite parts about it is that we know that a lot of material is collected for recycling, and we know it gets really beautifully sorted at these sorting facilities and into its different categories. But what we don't know is where it goes after that. Mm-hmm. That's the missing piece that inspires so much mistrust. And this law will require responsible, transparent end markets. Mm-hmm. So we will know where it's going and how it's getting recycled. So that is tremendously exciting. So
it is. I'm super excited about that as well. I mean, I was on the Public Works Committee here with the city when all of a sudden we couldn't ship our recycling overseas anymore, and it caused us to go into a bit of a tumult trying to figure out how to make up that gap. I'm sure you saw recently that glass wasn't being collected necessarily. And so part of what the oversight from Department of Ecology will be to actually do site inspections at any facility that we are sending our final products to ensure that they are in fact being recycled and not just put in somebody else's landfill. So very excited about that too. And the consistent statewide list, like I think people don't realize how it's 500,000 Washington households don't have access to recycling, and it's primarily in rural areas and in multifamily housing, and so to be able to roll that out literally and figuratively is going to be very exciting.
Awesome, thank you. And then Rep. Bramwell, I just wanted to mention a couple things briefly to you. The $100 million in public safety grants, that's fantastic. All cities have been clamoring for that, and as you know, we had a levy lid lift that the council voted, all of us unanimously, to put on the ballot, very well supported by the community, for us to hire 5 new police officers and 8 firefighter medics. So, but we need more in public safety, so thank you. I had a question about the REIT for affordable housing. Was there also a REIT being proposed for parks and different facilities too, or am I missing that up with something else?
Yeah, so there were a couple of things happening in the REIT space this last year, and I think we did get the one across the finish line that allows us allows local governments to combine the uses for REIT 1 and REIT 2. So that may be what you're talking about. So it was kind of as I understand it was kind of an I see the mayor nodding his head. It's kind of an accounting nightmare of like which thing can you spend which dollars on. It's all coming from the same transaction, and it's all going to the same place, and we just kind of make accountants' lives a little bit easier by
and our finance managers as well. So thank you. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that was a good one. Sorry.
Oh no, that's it. Thank you.
So we did get that one across the finish line. The REIT for affordable housing would have been an option for an additional local option to bump that up either up to 0.5% dedicated for affordable housing, but that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, the REIT 1 and 2 thing was just so annoying, and I appreciate you getting that one through, because 20-year finance director is like, we all have to think every time, wait, REIT 1 can be used for this, and this, REIT 2 for this, so thanks.
Yeah, Representative Dave Ball from
Yeah,
Oak Harbor
thanks,
was the champion on that one.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
No, I just wanted to thank you for the hard work. I know it's not easy. Being a public servant is a labor of love, but not always rewarded with all of the thanks and the appreciation. Sometimes it's a little bit of, pardon me, excuse me, I didn't mean to push that, but I needed this. And so I really want to thank you, and what I really appreciate about the legislative delegation that we have, you work together. You work in tandem. You work to make sure everyone is informed, your staff, your team. They collaborate for the greater good of the people. And, you know, that's not always an easy thing to accomplish. And, you know, so, you know, and also, you know, again, I'm impressed by your energy. You know, but, you know, really, honestly, I wanted to thank you sometimes for the heads up that comes to tell us about things that are happening, or just to be aware, such that we can also, as council members and, you know, other public officials, sort of seed the community with not only opportunity, but the things to look out for. So I really appreciate that, and just really want to say thank you very much for all the work you do.
You mind if I
Yeah,
pop
go for
in?
it. Go ahead.
You know, I think I probably got a text message from almost all of you over the course of session. So, you know, one of the things that it's not only that we work together as a delegation, but that we really try to have strong communication back home, so that you guys can talk to us in real time about, like, hey, actually, if you do this thing, it's gonna, you know, hurt this, or hey, we love this idea, you know, we really want to support it. And that is super helpful to us because you're hearing from people, you're on the ground, you're home, and that I love that we have that line of communication. And we also, you know, in terms of the public reaching out to our offices, we really want to make sure there's no wrong door, that if you reach out to any one of our offices, we'll make sure that somebody is getting back with you, and that as much as we can be helpful, we are. And also, I want to say happy kickoff to Pride Month. I tried to dress appropriately, and an early happy Juneteenth to the community as well.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
I want to extend my thanks as well for the work that you're doing and all the programs that you are coming up with to try to solve the various problems. But I want to put in a plug, kind of in the vein of the combination of the allowed uses for REIT 1 and 2. As you're coming up with these programs, it is important to go back and then simplify. You know, I think of a number, 5290 from 2023, the one that created the changes to the local project review and established time periods, but also really overcomplicated things. Anytime, and the legislature made a number of changes to that this year, little changes, but little changes can help. There's so much angst and churn and local government, you know, 300 local governments trying to interpret and apply these statutes. So if you're able to, at any time, simplify language, don't just use what lobbyists hand you, and then go back and fix things, even minor things. It really makes a difference when you multiply it by all the various cities and counties that have to touch it and have to then write their own code to implement it. I know that, Senator Loveland, you've been pushing hard on development regulation funding because we usually don't get that kind of money, and that is where the rubber hits the road. It just, across almost everything, not just in the growth management context, it's so important to achieve the objective that you're trying to achieve, but simplify the implementation so that we can all understand it and we can all get it done.
Well, and again, that's where that communication coming from you guys is super helpful. And we do also get suggestions from trade organizations and such, so like the Planners Association, from AWC. I mean, being one of the leaders on local government in the legislature, I am in very constant communication with those two organizations very specifically to make sure that we have eyeballs on it that are looking at it for those more technical pieces, so that we're getting things done that we need to get done. There's the practical, there's the political, and there's the policy, and those three things aren't always on the same page, but that's what trailer bills are for, and that's what JLARC is for, the Joint Legislative Audit Review Committee. That way, say we had some harebrained tax preference that we thought would be awesome, and turns out it wasn't, we have a way of coming back and looking at that and making evaluations and course correcting through the process, because there's basically no such thing as a perfect bill. So.
Thanks. And I'll just add, I think there's really kind of no substitute for open lines of communication between all of us. Like, that is how we get the information about what is and isn't working. And I think we can all be doing better. We can all always do a better job of connecting more. One of my big regrets from a couple of years ago, we passed the accessory dwelling unit legislation, setting standards for how cities can implement these. And the city of Bellingham had literally been working on, which is also part of our district, had been working on their own set of regulations, which was out of compliance with the bill we passed. And so their ordinance was in effect and in compliance for about a month before we passed legislation. If we'd just done a little bit better job of air traffic control, we could have saved them a lot of time and some headaches. So always try to keep the door open for communications to prevent those kinds of problems too.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini?
I just wanted to voice, I know it didn't get done in this last regular session, but I just wanted to voice my support for your short-term rental tax that you keep trying for. You know,
Speaking my love language
I'm
over
sorry.
here.
I know that we have here in Anacortes, unless you're grandfathered in, we have that outright ban on Airbnbs. I'm also somebody that believes that there is a middle ground to find there, and that there is an opportunity for us to really fund some affordable housing initiatives through a potential tax on Airbnbs. It seems like that's been a tough road to slog, but I just really appreciate you doing that, and if there's anything that I can do to help, and if you kind of could just let me know maybe what you're going to try to do next with that. Or
Yeah, man, that one has been a dog's age. I think I brought it to Darcy about 10 years ago to try to see if it was something that we could do without state authority, and she was very clear with me, like, nah, please, we don't like to do that. So I've gotten it to the House Rules Committee 3 times. This year in particular, there was a lot of member dynamics that I think made floor time at a premium, especially in the House. I know it was tough, given all the different things we had going on, but planning on bringing it back next year. Verbo is pro and has been really helping with that effort on the ground in Olympia because they see it as that compromise position, and we also have done things like exempt owner occupancy, so if you're just renting out a room in your house to try to make ends meet, that's less of vacation rental, and it doesn't have that same displacement impact that that renting total units does on our workforce housing availability.
I would just say, I hope all of you will continue advocating for opportunity. I think one of the things that we're going to hear, and I hope we hear, is that local government need more tools in toolbox. And this is a great example. There are a number of others that didn't get across the finish line this year. And I'm very hopeful that our colleagues will keep hearing that that's what is really needed in communities. For folks at the local level to be able to solve problems. So keep up that advocacy, and we'll come back next year and keep trying.
All right, this is an asterisk item, and I haven't asked any member of the audience, but I'm a little reluctant to do that because I don't want, there's an opportunity to engage with your legislators on a regular basis. So again, appreciate keeping those lines of communication open, and thanks for coming, and hopefully you'll stay for the next part where Ms. Shu's going to talk about our legislative scorecard to council to see. So that's enough of putting you on the spot.
I will watch the highlight reel tomorrow.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much, and I feel like I can say, whatever political differences and disagreements, I think I can say this as a former career military officer. Thank you for your service in Olympia. Because it's not easy, and so appreciate that.
Yeah,
Back at
thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your service here at home.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. All right, next item is item 6B. This is the 2025 City of Anacortes Legislative Priorities Outcomes. This is a discussion item.
Mayor, council members of the audience, I'm pleased to be able to present from the City of Anacortes' perspective our legislative session's outcomes. but it does feel a little bit awkward after the last
Yeah,
presentation.
but they left, though, so.
Okay. So, every year in November and December, as we're busy working on the budget, there's also work that's being done with the city council and staff to identify what our legislative priorities for the next legislative session are. And just as a reminder, the reason that we go through this process is that it allows us the opportunity to be better stewards of what the city council and is looking for when we go down and meet with our legislators, which we do, and have regular, recurring conversations with them. So this was what we had come up with for the legislative priorities for 2025. And I should be hitting on every one of those items. So. One of the first priorities is that we had asked for funding for repaving State Route 20 Spur Commercial Avenue. The outcome was that there was some money, then $3.9 million, that went into a small city pavement and sidewalk program, but there wasn't any dedicated line item specifically for the Anacortes project. And this is something that we spend a lot of time talking with our legislators and looking for different options to help support. Every year, we've been asking for them to restore the international ferry service between Anacortes and Sydney, BC. Right now, it has a projected start date of 2030. Just as a reminder that run cannot be canceled except with legislative action, and so their action right now is to take no action until 2030. Sorry, that picture, so.
Mr. Walters?
I was encouraged, however, to hear Representative Rammel indicate that they think that they're going to be able to fund at least 3 boats with the money they've already allocated. Of course, restoring this run requires them to fund the next 3 boats after that, too. But still, that was good news. Also, the Wenatchee, the super ferry to get retrofitted for electric, is apparently in the water, now back at Eagle Harbor and ready to get outfitted and ready to go. Turns out electricity works, which is not a big surprise since ferries have been running on electricity for the last 50 years, but they've demonstrated that tech, and the governor has pulled the other super ferries off the schedule for retrofit, so they'll stay in the fleet. I think there's a lot of good news, none of which yielded restoration of this run, but laid the groundwork to in fact, still maybe get it back in 2030, which, looks less and less likely every year you get there, except so much good news this year gives me more hope.
I agree. There was good work that was occurring on behalf of the ferries in terms of getting different ideas and from possibly having more than one vendor who then would be building these boats to help speed that process. And so my understanding is that the date for the bids to come in was extended by an additional month at the request of the companies that are bidding, and that was granted. So we're still waiting to see what those bids are. But I agree that is good news. And the other good thing is that the Ferry Advisory Committees continue. And at one point that was maybe coming off the table, having ferry advisory committees in communities like Anacortes. We had specifically asked for $500,000 of capital grant support for the Anacortes Community Event Center, our joint agreement that we're working towards with the Port of Anacortes and the city. Unfortunately, that did not move forward from the state level, but we do have some good news that the $3 million request that we made for capital appropriations has made Congressman Larson's shortlist, and that project is moving forward. So more to come on that. In terms of behavioral health and treatment capacity, we had asked in alignment with Skagit County for funds to support the Skagit Star Center and co-responder programs. And we are pleased that the capital budget did include $133 million for community behavioral health grants. And specifically, the Skagit Stabilization Center received $549,000 allocated to that program.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
Do you know how that 549 compares to the ask? Was there a specific number?
I don't have that exact number, but I think it was very close to what we had asked. Mayor Miller may know better than I do.
I don't know that number off
Sorry.
but for the public that may not be following this as closely, this is a important project that allows law enforcement in particular to be able to have a facility that can, for all of Skagit County. So again, this is a facility that I was privileged enough to be at the groundbreaking, and it's going to add a significant capability that didn't exist of drop-offs for mental health or substance abuse issues for law enforcement basically at all hours. So you're not going to the hospital, you're not going to the jail. It's this is an important piece, so we'll take it.
Definitely a step in the right direction. In regard to Parks and Recreation investments, we had specifically asked for funds through the Aquatic Lands Enhancement Account, otherwise known as ALEA, for Heart Lake restoration. And we were successful in having $472,000 put towards the shoreline restoration project there. We had also hoped that the Washington Wildlife and Recreation Program would have more than $150 million funding. It actually was reduced to $120 million. And there wasn't any increase in the youth athletic facilities account. But good news on the shoreline restoration at Heart Lake. For several years now, we've been asking for some changes to the property tax cap. Right now, it is limited to 1% property tax increase. We had asked for up to 3%. And I think as the senator and representatives have discussed, that that ended up stalling, and that cap lift provision ended up not being a part of the final budget. In terms of housing supply and affordability, we had asked for flexibility in REIT, and I have another slide that will specifically talk about that, about multifamily incentives and also low-income housing funds. And there was significant capital budget investments in both housing and homelessness, and there was continued funding of the Connected Housing to Infrastructure Program, and the acronym for that is CHIP. And I just mentioned that because I mentioned it later in the presentation. So in regard to the REIT flexibility, as we discussed in the earlier presentation, this is very helpful to the city of Anacortes and really all cities. So REIT stands for Real Estate Excise Tax, and there's two different portions of that when a property is sold. But there used to be different things, like REIT 1 could be used for this list of items, and REIT 2 could be used for this list of items. So they really have been able to harmonize that list. It allows for 35% or up to $100,000 of REIT revenue to now be used for operations and maintenance. That's new and helpful to us for existing capital projects. And it also allows an expansion of REIT funds so that it can be utilized for public safety and other facilities. So those are things that will be beneficial, and we will no longer have to pull out the chart that says, you know, what we can use REIT 1 versus REIT 2. The finance director from the city of Oak Harbor was really drafted this policy, and so very appreciative that locally we were able to make a really significant difference that is going to help cities across the state. Public safety's in the workforce for public safety, we continuously ask for help in both recruiting and retaining officers, for reducing juvenile crime, and for funding drug task forces. And the state ended up creating a $100 million pool for local hiring, and that is a grant program that we would have to apply for a grant to be successful for that. It does maintain that the cities are responsible for 25% of the cost for the Basic Law Enforcement Academy, which is better than it's been in the past, but like we really would, you know, hope that maybe would be even more than that. near and dear to my heart, indigent defense and caseload standards. We had specifically made the request that the state share and adopt the share and the costs associated with indigent defense, and make a decision in regard to the caseload limits, not necessarily adopt the new caseload limits that have been proposed. What they did do instead was that they are increasing the amount available in grants to be able to apply towards indigent defense costs. And they did not, they're still waiting for the Washington State Supreme Court to make a decision on the new standards of caseload limits. So they didn't take any action on that. In terms of infrastructure funding tools, one of the things that every year we come and talk about is maintaining the Public Works Assistance Account, the PWAA, for dedicated funding to support capital projects. It does provide us a low-interest loan to be able, and it becomes like a trust fund that keeps rebuilding itself. We're looking for some dedicated funding for transportation and for housing infrastructure. In the end, there was a $100 million bond authority that went to the Public Works Assistance Account. And there was, of the new 6 cents gas tax, the cities will receive 2.5% of that 6%, 6 cents. And so that equates to about $20,000 for the city of Anacortes and new revenue that will be coming in that we can use towards transportation projects. Never going to scoff at $20,000 because that's almost 1/4% of a property tax increase. So every little bit does help. But it wasn't exactly everything we were looking for, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. So trying to just look back over the session, things that I think that were positive impacts in regard to the city in terms of the legislation is that there was $100 million for grants for the criminal justice account, the supplemental criminal justice account, that we're going to get about $20,000 in new revenue from the portion of the 6 cents gas tax increase that will be used for transportation. That there was a continued support for the housing affordability infrastructure program, and that there was some impact funds that were set aside to help offset those costs, and that there's an increase in the public defense grants available. One of the pieces I just wanted to bring up that I thought was challenging for the city is that they specifically adopted a policy that allows for unemployment benefits for striking workers. And we, as the Association of Washington Cities and individual cities, did a lot of talking with the legislature about this. The reason that it's a concern is that we have anti-strike language at the state level for public safety. And when the public safety decided that they were going to give up the ability to strike, they had access to binding arbitration. And despite us sharing this information with the legislature and saying, just carve out public safety, carve out the transit workers that also have that same provision, they did not. So that's something I think that might need some work in future years, but was adopted this year. And then, so I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm probably not an expert at all the legislation that went through. It's a busy time to try and stay on top of things, but I do think and I appreciate that there was a suggestion that we add this as a part of an annual review of how did we fare.
Yeah, appreciate that presentation, and appreciate council asking for that feedback from, how did it go? Since, my cynical feedback is always my favorite Mark Twain quote that no one's life, liberty, or wallet is more in jeopardy when the legislature's in session, but anyway, we're keeping those communication lines open. All right, council, questions for Ms. Hsu?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
No, thank you, Ms. Hsu, for an in-depth and illuminating presentation. I think it's really always helpful, not only for us as council, but also the public to realize what's taking place and what's not taking place. And what I really appreciated about your presentation is not only did you show what the opportunity is, whether it's a grant or whether it's a fund for us, but you also indicated what Anacortes may be receiving out of it. And, sometimes numbers, when people present this pool of resources out there, it can sort of, we can infer that we can get a larger share of that amount of 100 million or whatever the number is, but the reality is no. And so what I appreciate about your presentation is not only do you talk about the possibility of this amount of money that helps everyone, but you also specifically narrows it down to Anacortes, because when the rubber hits the pavement, that's how it's going to be impactful for us in the city that we're running and trying to make sure it's getting all this stuff. So I appreciate that. I will look for more of that as you continue to do your presentations. But for me, that is a critical component of understanding what we have to work with and what you, as part of this team, have to contend with to try to make the numbers match up and function for what we want. It really is difficult times, I think, for tightening the belt, but it's also a wonderful time to explore other possibilities, collaborations, and how we can be even more efficient with what we have. And so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Hsu, for the report. Really appreciate it. And nobody can expect to bat 1,000, but I think all in all, like, some good results. So I want to thank you and the mayor and also council members who basically have been in, a lot of contact with our representatives. I did have a quick question on Mr. Larson's thing, though. You said, I think it was short list, like, is it money in the bank or could we get punted?
Not money in the bank yet, but cities were asked for capital, and counties and just different delegations were asked for capital appropriations requests. We submitted a package specifically for the community event center to help with the construction costs. And we made a request for $3 million, and that made the kind of filtered down through the first list, and I think we're on the short list of 13 or 15.
15 projects
15
that
projects.
Rep Larson has in, and it's further along than we have been. Last year, we submitted the same to all of our federal representatives, and the project was a little immature, I think, at the time. So it's positive. It's definitely not money in the bank. It's the 2026 federal appropriations budget. But we're excited, and you'll see a press release come out very shortly on that. So, good question. All right, anybody else? Okay, thank you very much, and we will move on to item 6C, which is Ben Root Skate Park Restroom and Parking Lot Project Design. This is a discussion item only. Mr. Vokes is going to lead this one off, and I know there was some good discussion on this last time this came up. So Mr. Vokes has all sorts of answers for council. You're on whenever you're ready.
Mayor Miller, members of the council, members of the audience, thank you for having me back for some further public restroom discussion. Always a highlight for all of us and a key part of the services we provide as a Parks Department. So I thought what I'd do is run through a couple of slides, and then we can certainly discuss the information that we submitted in our council packet. So as you know, we've got a really nicely redone skate park and pump track. And just to remind you where it all is, there along R Avenue and between R and the Tommy Thompson. And we do not yet have a parking lot, And so we've got one designed, but we need to build it. And then we also, as we know, we need to relocate a restroom north of us to the box that we've got shown here on this site map. We talked a lot about restrooms last time when we brought this design contract to you on May 5th, I believe. And there was a lot of support from the council to pursue the Portland Loo unit as opposed to the CXT unit that we have traditionally used the last few years and found some success with. One of the big questions was the RCO office did say that 2 Portland Loos would be a sufficient replacement for what we have now. From our perspective, while it's great to have that approval, that is a reduction in service by 2 holes, really, because right now we have 2 units for men, 2 for women, and reducing it, may or may not be a gigantic issue. The current restroom where it is located there is frequently used by people that never use the park or the trail. They just use the restroom because it's easy to drive in and out of it. It's on the way to and from a lot of things. One of the big hurdles that we have run into is that the current Portland Loo unit does not meet the required turning radius for wheelchairs in the state of Washington. Now, there are some municipalities that have forged ahead in the face of this, and others that haven't. Burlington's story was an interesting one, and we threw that article in the packet for you to take a look at. Certainly, people have liked them and think they work well, but when I went upstairs to talk to our building department, this is what I learned. The other thing is they are working on basically a Portland Loo 2, which would have the turning radius required by the state of Washington, L&I. As you can see in this diagram, that unit starts to become much more of a square than the sort of Flash Gordon trolley that the current units are. And they're going to be, and again, this is just one of their staff people throwing out ballpark figures, but they're looking at, let's just say, $200,000 for one unit. And right now, with the extras that we would want to put in the CXT unit, which is on the left picture there, it'd be about $175,000 total. That's not the groundwork. That's all the bells and whistles and the unit delivered. So we're looking at least probably double the price to use the new Portland Loo. The other thing that you asked us to do was to talk to folks, public safety, both the fire department and the police department, and you've got the memos and the information in your packet. We were excited to see how little data they came up with. And what it reminds us is that most of our issues related to those that are unhoused are happening in the woods, they're happening in parks, they're not specifically headquartered just at restrooms. Most of the time we spend cleaning up after folks that are either camping or living where we would rather they didn't, is really in more remote areas. If you want to call Cap Santa remote, that's one of the main ones. But we've hauled out some giant loads of goods and items out of the forest lands on more than one occasion. So our restrooms themselves did not show up both in the fire department and the police department's radar at the rate that, quite honestly, we thought they would. So the staff recommendation is we would love to move forward with this project. We like the CXT unit, and we'd like to put this design contract back on a consent agenda in the near future. But obviously, we've got some things to talk about here, and I'll do my best to discuss those.
All right. Well, again, hopefully, Mr. Vogts answered all the questions that you had, but any additional questions, concerns, council?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young?
No, what I really appreciated about your presentation was that it addressed the concerns that were expressed, by council and probably the constituents out and about. One of the issues was of safety, 2, utility, 3, 1, cost effectiveness, but what I saw in this presentation was a total cost that was so much better on one hand versus the other. Now, design is a whole nother thing. But do we really want to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars more than that? But the key thing that I think that everybody was concerned about, because we hear it happening in cities across, the country, Seattle and other places, was safety. And what people were using those resources to do. And for us, there are those of us that are law-abiding, mostly, unless I'm not aware. But it also infringes on us. I know the goal is to try to make sure it's safe for everyone and that everyone has access to the same services, but sometimes when we restrict so much because of what happens, it harms the majority as well. And so, what I was surprised about, and I'm so glad that you pointed out, was the number of incidences that were happening, because for me, I was concerned about that as well. I thought it was a big issue, but in this case, it seems that it's not. And, I'm of the opinion that if it's not now, and if we can look forward as far as we can into the future, predicting from today's knowledge what that might be like, then we make the best decision that we can. But I think further down the road, if it's something that we're discovering that's not working appropriately as it should, I think the onus is on us as a city to address those. So, but, I really appreciate what you've presented. I'm happy with it at this point, unless there's some other questions that comes out of council or the public that, may tweak my interest to say that, this may or may not be the best choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Hubick?
would you go back to the slide with the cost, please?
I'm sorry, which one?
The cost.
The slide with the costs, the prices.
I'm between hearing aids right now, and it's this room is tough for me.
It's all that punk music. No, you had it.
There we
Perfect.
go.
I just wanted to see that again and note the differentiation between total and then each. So 2 Portland Loos on the high end, approximately $420.
Again, yes, based on an email exchange with one of their staff people. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini?
Sorry. Thank you very much, and thank you for answering what I feel like is a lot of the questions that all of the questions that we had last time we were here. When I look at something like this, part of how there's 3 things that I kind of base my vote off of. One is public input, and I feel like I reached out and heard from a lot of people, whether it be sitting at the bank or going out wherever, and it's kind of a split. I don't think there was really so many people in favor or so many people against. I was surprised at actually how split it was. The other thing I look at is solution to a problem. Is this a solution to a problem? And it seems like, yes, I think we're always, regardless of the kind of bathrooms we have, gonna have some kind of drug issue or some kind of issue with that. I don't think there's any bathroom that's going to fix that, but I was also encouraged to see how small the numbers were comparatively, especially during kind of the COVID years, for lack of a better term. So the last thing for me that it kind of comes down to is cost. And as I understand it, we have about $700,000 set aside. Is that the right number for the restrooms? And does that include the parking lot, or is that just the...
No, that's for the whole, basically what we are calling phase 2 of the skateboard improvement project.
Okay. So one of the things for me that I think about is, I think it was just addressed in our legislative priorities that, we look to, there's been a lot of support for increasing that threshold of taxes from 1% to 3%. And when I look at what 1% this year was, I think, $84,000. So if you're telling me that we can save almost $300,000 by going with something, I think that's just a very fiscally responsible decision to make. We've had a lot of concern up here on revenues and budgets, and so to me, I feel like the Portland Loo is attractive, but from a fiscal standpoint, I think this is a much more responsible fiscal decision to make. The other thing for me is, we also put a lot of investment into our city on ADA compliancy. We've got a whole Commercial Avenue project where, thankfully, that we're looking at replacing ADA ramps. We just put up a ADA compliant lookout thanks to the Rotary Park up there. We are a city that definitely values access. So the fact that the current Portland Loos don't meet those standards, I'm definitely not in favor of those, but at this point in time. But then that also makes me wonder, will the new ones be better? Will they, is it just ADA access? Will there be different problems that come up? I think I read that that design also gives us freezing pipes that can occasionally burst, and we're definitely a cold weather climate. I think that would be an additional cost that's incurred. So I'm very much in favor of the CXT. Of that. I did have one question. Our legislative session, I did notice there was a bill passed, strangely enough, that requires more access to changing tables in public restrooms. I don't know if you're aware of that, but that is something that did pass through the legislature this last session.
We have a heck of a time maintaining changing tables in rest. They're usually the first thing to go when we open a restroom. People like to sit on them that are not babies, and other activities. But yeah, the changing table is. I've been doing this for a long time, and I haven't solved the changing table problem yet. But it sounds like we're going to have to. We're going to have to figure it out.
It kind of sounds like the state says that we're going to have to do that. Yep. And so I just, my question is, now that we have that, is there an option in your research for Portland Loos to have changing tables in those? There is? Oh, I'm sorry. Is that a frustrating question?
So,
sorry, it appears my time is allotted. Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
Thank you for the presentation. I think a lot of this work answers a lot of the questions that we had asked in the past and addresses a lot of the concerns. In our prior discussion of this, we were looking at a much smaller price for the Portland Loo, and certainly the ADA accessibility is just a bizarre wrinkle. Because there's this talk about, well, in Washington State it doesn't meet the specs. Well, these are international standards. It's not a Washington State specific thing. So I still have yet to figure out why this has come up only in Washington State and why it has come up after so many other jurisdictions have deployed these restrooms. But we can handle that, I guess, a different time, unless you've got a quick answer to that, because it is what it is. So with the difference in price, it's quite a bit of a conversation now. However, what we are proposing to install at this site really looks a lot like what we have at the roundabout site now, in terms of layout at least. And I understand that to be a different construction method. It's right? The 22nd roundabout is not going to be the same.
It's not a
construction.
CXT unit.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that one's got, assumedly has some weatherization problems too, and it's not freezing, bursting pipes because it's not the under pressure pipes, it's the drain waste pipes that are the problem. But I think we could get around those things. I think it's the double price that is really the bottleneck here. What I do think we have to do, though, is do something different with our public restroom strategy generally. The 22nd and our roundabouts they're awful. And I'm concerned that the new restroom that we get here is going to suffer a similar fate. So if that means we need more maintenance, which is going to cost more money, I mean, it may not be that we can evade the additional cost and provide the level of service that we want. It might be that we just move it from the capital side to the OpEx side. But we've got to do something, because those restrooms, and they're not the same as all the restrooms in the system, but they are not befitting the city of Anacortes. You know, the ones at the depot are better. The ones at Storvik are locked a lot. So no matter what their condition, if they're not open, you know, they're not providing the service that we need. So I think, you know, this effort was an effort to try to do something different, but as the price becomes less attainable, especially compared to a cheaper option, it makes less sense. Doesn't mean the conversation is over, I don't think. We've still got to figure out a better strategy for maintaining hygienic, appropriate public restrooms for both the traveling, visiting public, but also for our own residents. And that might mean really a holistic look at a whole bunch of stuff. I know Oak Harbor got a grant for some of their Portland loos that they installed. Maybe that's a possibility in the future for us. Do we end up having to replace the Storvik restrooms that we really only installed 10 plus 12 years ago or something like that? We just need to figure something out. So the level of detail and analysis that you've put into this, I think, would be useful for some future analysis of what the various problems are at the restrooms that we have, so we can figure out how to solve some of those, maybe at a lower cost than what we're looking at here. But yeah, I think the legislature definitely, I mean, all good intentions, but they probably didn't do us a lot of favors by requiring changing tables in every restroom, because they are not going to work out unless, you know, we develop some kind of bulletproof changing table. But, you know, I want to express very clearly my dissatisfaction with the level of service we are providing in restrooms across the board. And again, some are better than others. And some we don't operate either. You know, some of these metrics, and I think there are some data problems with the metrics, but they don't capture the chamber restrooms, which we pay for, and there's another restroom on the Tommy Thompson Trail, which we pay for. And then there are restrooms all over town. The port has had all these problems. Look, there was an article in the paper last week, LaConner decided to change the hours of operation of their restroom. So it's certainly not an uncommon thing, and it's not a problem endemic only to Anacortes, but it is something that we need to figure out some new strategy on that might involve getting Portland loos in the future.
All right. Any,
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Cleveland McGrath.
Thank you. Thank you for doing all this research. I think this was really helpful and answered a number of our questions. It's unfortunate that the cost of the Portland loos for the second version is so much higher than the first version. Anecdotally, being in one of those, wheelchair, double stroller, not a problem. The ones in Oak Harbor that I've used with my kids, super easy. So the fact that we are now, it's no longer ADA compliant, kind of blows my mind. There's also other improvements that they're making with those, with the version 2. That being said, I mean, the cost is obviously stops it right there, as long as we can find a plan for keeping them cleaner. I guess I have an ongoing frustration at time, frustration for some of our public restrooms when I frequently use the porta potty along the Tommy Thompson Trail out by the Samish RV park, and those bathrooms are consistently cleaner than our bathrooms at Storvik Park. And I think that trying to solve that issue kind of goes off what Mr. Walters said. I do like the fact that this version does not have those kind of privacy exterior walls. I think the ones that are currently next to the skate park that we're going to be replacing, I don't think it makes it friendlier or more attractive or just user friendly. Will these be more like the Washington Park ones that were just installed, aesthetically and design-wise? I mean,
Yes.
obviously the floor plan will be, okay. So those are better. So that makes me feel better about that. Those are more attractive and they seem to stay cleaner. So that's helpful. When I look at could you go back to the site design of just how the bathrooms will be oriented next to the skate park? And do we have a sense of where the doors will be? The access point?
We don't yet.
Okay.
That's, one of the things we're going to be working with our engineering firm on is the exact location. Because as you know, in that corner, the world gets pretty wet in there. And so we, to specifically say which direction it's going to face, at this point, I'm thinking that it's going to be oriented obviously towards the north because that's going to capture people from the trail as well as from the park.
Okay. I assume that'll be a best design by the experts. I just am less inclined to have those exterior walls that really kind of create this outdoor room because I doesn't feel safe when you approach it when I used these bathrooms this last week. So I appreciate this work. I appreciate the fact that RCO said we could do something else, but doesn't quite make sense to spend an extra couple $100,000. So thank you.
All right. Mr. Walters.
With respect to orientation, when we did the skate park design, I'd asked about using some environmental design techniques to try to minimize crime problems. And with respect to these restrooms, will we take that into account when orienting the doors? Because orientation towards our avenue might have more eyes on it, but then you won't have eyes on it if you're coming from the trail. It seems like that could make a significant difference.
Yeah, and it's going to affect line of sight no matter where we put it, right? Because we can't look through it. But with the traffic on our avenue, that has been one of the real helpful things, as you mentioned, for the skate park. So, if it's maybe it's kind of a northwest.
Well, it could be aligned to the trail because the trail runs diagonally. Maybe that would provide.
I'd be making up that answer right now.
Sure, yeah.
I just don't know yet from the when we get into the critical area setbacks over there.
My hope is simply that that a factor, which way the doors face to get eyes on it, is considered during layout. 'Cause I think
Absolutely.
those kinds of issues become important. And I think as Ms. Killian-McGrath was mentioning, the R Avenue or the 22nd Street roundabout bathrooms they're kind of back in a hole.
Yep.
They don't have the eyes on it from the street that you might want, and I think that's to their detriment.
No, they're tired and they've been there a long time and they've had some years of service. So
yeah.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Cleveland-McGrath.
One more thing going off the existing bathrooms is when you approach that parking lot, there is a lot of overgrown bushes and foliage. And so I assume because it's already grass here, I hope that we can have more of a high visibility, minimal kind of bushes and dark areas and things like that for this bathroom and parking lot area.
yeah, well, and I don't mean to interrupt, but
No.
for the entire park, it's the kids that hang out there regularly that I've talked to, nobody has complained about the lack of bushes to hide behind. They're very happy with the park. So yes, that's line of sight, safety of the visitors is something we do our best to pursue when we can.
All right, so I think I've heard from the majority of council that you're comfortable with this coming back on consent.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
Yes, I'll be brief. I just want to say, echo, thank you for doing all of this work and presenting this, because this makes us able to make a really good, clear decision based on excellent information. So thank you.
Sure. No, we want to, we want to be on the team.
Well, thank you. Great discussion. Thank you, Mr. Vokes. Okay, we'll look for that on consent. Of course, you can pull it off if you got any real concerns at the last minute, but
Okay.
so that'll be the plan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. All right, next up is item 6D. This is the Transportation Master Plan, and this is a discussion item. Mr. Rayum, and yeah, I didn't give you any time because the title's not long enough. But whenever you're ready.
Things make me feel old. Hold on a second.
No rush, but whenever you're ready.
Okay, now we're ready. Mayor and City Council, good evening. Andy Rayum, Public Works Director. We are here tonight to present to you the Transportation Master Plan. Various different mandated documents inform transportation master planning and include the ADA Transition Plan, which you just approved one, the Safety Action Plan, which you approved recently, road standards, transportation element of the comp plan, and the annually updated Transportation Improvement Program. Unfortunately, my dream was to combine all those things into one document, but you can't do that. Each individual regulation requires to have a separate, very specific document. So when we say transportation master plan, it's kind of a conglomerate of all those things. What we did do is try to beef up the transportation element of the comp plan to get information from all these different documents and put it into one place. So that's why in your packet you have a draft element of the comprehensive plan, but this is not the adoption of the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is going to be adopted downstream. I know Mr. Coleman was very concerned, wanted me to make sure you knew this is not the comp plan. This is just us trying to inform you all the information we used to pull together a transportation master plan, if you will, instead of just the element of the comp plan.
Mayor Whalen?
Mr. Walters?
I think this is a good approach that is going to benefit us. To be able to go to one place, especially as the comp plan migrates to code publishing, go to one place, read this alongside everything else. I think that will work better.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I was hoping.
You've included the goals and policies from the existing transportation element in the comp plan in this document because this is going to be part of that part of the comp plan. Can you give us at some point later a red line of what you've changed?
Oh yeah, you'll get a red line for sure. As part of the comp plan update. Yeah, we're not looking for you guys to adopt this tonight. We were just using it to speak to kind of what we've done with transportation planning to date, because the big thing is, I don't know if you remember this last year, but you need to adopt by July 1st a transportation improvement plan. Is that the right term? Yes, program. So, so we have to do that by July 1st. So we want to come and present to you what we've done to date. And then we're going to start the public hearing not this week and not next week because my twin nieces are graduating from high school, and I said I wasn't going to go because I had to go to the council meeting, and that didn't land well. So I'm hoping I'm going to kick it down this one more week, but we have two council meetings. We can still do it on time by July 1st. So with that, Chris Como with Transpo Group. So we contracted Transpo Group to kind of get our transportation master planning efforts in alignment here at the city about a year ago. He's here tonight, and he's going to brief you on the content of the transportation element and how it informs transportation improvement program. And like I said, then we'll be back to do the public hearing on the transportation improvement program. With that, Chris is there.
The spreadsheet's up here too. Good evening, Council. Thank you for having me. As you just heard, this is going to be mostly informational. I'm going to go very quickly. We can always come back to slides. I know you got a lot and you've had a lot, so we'll go right through this. I don't need to take a lot of time on each slide. Whoops, is this going to advance? There we go. Okay, this is just essentially what we're going to talk about. I'm not going to read through this. If you want to come back to this later, we can certainly do that. This is just giving you an idea of what to expect. So the Growth Management Act that governs comprehensive plans was amended, and as it relates to transportation, there were several things that are now required that weren't before. People have probably heard about level of service standards, particularly as it pertains to vehicle issues. Now there's a requirement to adopt multimodal level of service standards, and that's for pedestrian, bicycle, as well as transit. Even though the city doesn't control transit, we'll talk about that when we get there. There's some other things in here as well. There's some adjustments to the state laws regarding transportation impact fees. We won't get into too much of that tonight. But basically, pay attention to the piece on the right side of the slide here. Really what's required with the transportation element is to implement your land use element. And then also show, if you're saying that there are things needed on the transportation side of the equation, you have to show how do you intend to pay for those things. So it's really asking the question, okay, we see that you say your transportation system needs to look like this. How do you expect to pay for that? And we'll talk a little bit about that. There's also some other things that happened in 2022. There were some changes to the RCWs as it relates to complete streets relating to state highways and of course for Anacortes, that's a very big deal. DOT also adopted an active transportation plan. And these two things together, what they really mean is on state highways, when DOT, if and when they show up to do work, if there's a project that is over $1 million, it was, by the way, $500,000 until this last legislative session. They just boosted it to $1 million. So it means fewer projects. If they show up to do work and it exceeds this amount, they are required to look through the lens of complete streets to provide facilities for all user groups. The active transportation plan, as it relates to state highways, is saying that they would prefer to see level of traffic stress type 1 or type 2 facilities. That means separated from vehicle traffic, essentially. That's good intention. It's very expensive and may not be possible in some cases, but that's what the plans say. This also pertains to only certain places, and they're called census-designated places or population centers. And as it relates to the Skagit County area, this is what it looks like. In the pink or orange, you see the incorporated areas, but it also pertains to population centers that are not incorporated. These are the census-designated places. This is a map that DOT created. I only show you this because we also did the work for the Skagit County transportation element, and we had to connect all of these places. And of course, Anacortes is one of these. As it relates to complete streets, we're talking about all users, all modes, and what we're really trying to do is focus on how do we provide facilities so that the transportation system can be safe as possible for all user groups, but especially vulnerable users like pedestrians, people on bicycles, people trying to get to public transit bus stops. And of course, as we've already kind of implied, it's very difficult, it's challenging, it's expensive, it requires balance and trade-off with everything, all the decisions that we make. We're talking about this because that's also what's going to be happening with the Transportation Improvement Program that we'll get to. And of course, we have to think about how do we want our transportation system to be used and how can we make it the most efficient as possible. If we're trying to move people, there's other ways than just cars to do it. That's kind of what's implied in this illustration here. That's also an important thing in relation to the Growth Management Act and some of the changes it's advocating for, as well as the climate element that's required. We're trying to reduce vehicle miles traveled, as well as greenhouse gas emissions and single occupant vehicle trips. So as was just mentioned a little bit ago, there's a question about the goals and policies. In the document in your packet, there are examples of goals and policies that were changed. We're not going to go through all those tonight. But just as some examples, there's some minor text updates. You have some really good, strong goals and policies from the last comprehensive plan. Then there's some new terminology being introduced, replacing things like non-motorized with active transportation. That's just industry standard these days. And then there's some new policies to comply with the Growth Management Act or the RCWs and things like that. So now we're just going to talk about some of the ingredients that go into the 6-year tip that we're going to get to. And I'm not going to go through these exhaustively, just an illustration of all the things that get thought about when we put this kind of stuff together. So obviously, your street system is the kind of the spine of the transportation system as most people relate to it. This is what your street system looks like. It's just kind of shown in functional classification, meaning the bigger roads have more traffic volumes, higher speeds, and the lower classified roads are more local access type roads. So then we also consider freight. What are some of the freight needs around town? Anacortes obviously has a very busy port and a lot of commerce coming through town, so the state highway system and other roads are very important for moving freight. We
Mayor
look at
Miller?
intersections.
Ms. Moulton?
I'm sorry, so should we, I just had a quick, should we wait till the end of the slides and then go back if we have a question about a particular slide?
That would be the most efficient,
Okay, you got
and
it.
it would make it go a lot faster. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So as it relates to traffic flow on the transportation system, intersections are the bottlenecks. This is where the congestion happens. This is where people really get unhappy when they have to wait too long in certain cases. And what this is showing is in 2024, the city's intersections, at least the busier ones, are all in great shape. You guys are, there's probably people who wouldn't agree with that. There always is, but the one that has an issue is the 12th and K intersection, and probably everybody knows that. In fact, we'll talk about that when we get to the 6-year tip a little bit later. But everything else is in really good shape in terms of the level of service standards that have been adopted for the city. So we look at transit. Transit obviously uses the street system, and it has impacts in terms of where it goes and what kind of congestion it might experience, keeping buses on time and making sure it can get people where they want to go conveniently and safely. Anacortes has several routes that Skagit Transit provides. The city doesn't control transit, but you do control the right-of-way in which transit operates, and that'll be key for something we'll talk about coming up here. Here's what your current sidewalk system looks like. You've got a really excellent downtown core with complete sidewalks, less so in some other parts of town. We'll talk about the active transportation network and how you can help flesh some of this out later. This is what the bicycle system looks like, at least the designated bicycle facility system in purple. There are some bike facilities. There's some bike routes. That doesn't necessarily mean facility. Talk more about that as we go with active transportation. Both of these past 2 slides have also shown the multi-use trail facilities in town, the Tommy Thompson and the Guemes Channel Trail. Oh, here you go. Here's the multi-use trails highlighted here. So again, just part of the system overall. As I mentioned, the transportation system needs to serve the future land use, and so this all has to integrate with the land use element of the comp plan. So, the Growth Management Act requires the adoption of multimodal level of service standards. And the big question is, there's no one right way to do this, so how should it be done in certain places? In the city of Anacortes, you were very fortunate in that you had a lot of really good work from 2016 from the Anacortes Walks and Bikes map. And so that was a great starting point, a great foundation for us to build from. And so what you're seeing here is what we're calling an active transportation network that almost mimics the map from 2016, but there's some changes, some subtleties. I just indicated over here on the right side of the screen, there's a couple things that are not included, things that are not really feasible or very expensive, or things that can't and shouldn't be done, like widening the roads in Washington Park and things like that. It also includes state highways, and that's going to show up here in just a minute. That's not a city responsibility, although the city can partner with DOT on projects, and of course, Highway 20 has a significant impact on the city of Anacortes, and the city will make investments on that more than likely going forward. In fact, we'll talk about that with the 6-year tip. You'll also see that in dark blue, you've got a primary piece of the network, and then lighter blue is secondary, and all that's indicating is, again, kind of like the functional classification map. The bigger roads have more traffic volume, more speeds. Those are the primary pieces. Then the secondary gets you more into the neighborhoody kind of areas of the city. As it relates to levels of service, what we're trying to do is establish a baseline, a network. And then we look at where are the gaps on that network, and that's what this map is showing. So if it's green, it means it meets the minimum standard that the city has required in terms of bicycle and sidewalk facilities. If it's orange, it's partially complete. There's something missing, maybe you can go fix that easily. Red means there's a gap. There's just not a facility available. And so that's where you really focus your efforts in terms of identifying projects. What this leads to is a project map. We'll get there. So back to multimodal level of service standards. That's how we get to active transportation standards. I'm sorry, did I miss something? I'm sorry, down in the corner, the standards are shown. You got green, orange, red, like I indicated, and the table down there in the corner that's the standard that the city would be adopting for active transportation, and that's what would be measured in terms of looking at the various investments. On the transit side, as I mentioned, the city doesn't control transit. You don't make transit financial decisions, or you don't provide the service, but you control the right-of-way in which it operates. And so what we're trying to do is create mutual benefit for both agencies, the city and Skagit Transit. And the city has an ADA transition plan that it needs to implement over time. And by looking at transit bus stop locations, you can use that as a way to prioritize where you make your ADA transition plan investments through the 6-year TIP. So both agencies benefit. The city gets a better implementation of the ADA transition plan, and Skagit Transit has safer, more convenient, and more accessible bus stop locations. Hopefully that creates a virtuous cycle and you maybe get some more transit ridership. So, casting forward, looking at the year 2045, the 20-year planning period, this is what the Skagit Council of Governments travel demand model shows. Anacortes is in good shape. Most of the congestion that's going to happen in the county is on the I-5 corridor in the urban areas there. You can see the reds and the yellows and the oranges. That indicates future congestion. So the city doesn't have any real big issues there in terms of the modeling side of things. At the intersections, though, these are the bottleneck points, and you can see the change from the 2024 situation. Again, you've got 12th and K there. It's gone from level of service E to F in the projection. Now remember, this is a model. It's an analytical tool. It's not magic. It's a prediction based on existing trends and assumptions. So anything that changes can change the outcome of that. But it is a way to ask the question, what if things stay the same, or what if they go in a certain direction, what can we expect? And that's the point of this. There's some other intersections over by the refinery area that also degrade in terms of vehicular level of service. And of course, this is all used to ask the question, where might the city need to make some investments over time? Now, some of these are on state highways, so it's not necessarily the city's responsibility to do some of this. But you can choose to partner with DOT as well as you move forward. And again, for some of these, you might just want to keep an eye on these intersections over time. There's no specific date when they're going to reach this level of service. So this leads to project maps. And on the active transportation network, all those gaps, the reds, they turn into projects. And same with the oranges. And so in green, you see the city responsible projects, and in blue is the DOT responsible projects. But again, that can be a combination. And in purple, you see further study needed. And all that's indicating is a feasibility study to really try to determine what might be needed here, or what kind of an alignment might be needed, or what might the cost be, or how are we going to do this. And that's shown for the Guaymas Channel Trail at this point. Just further study and trying to figure out what can happen there. So as it relates to the number of projects, there's over 70 of these in the city, and interestingly, on the active transportation side of things, we had great help from the Anacortes Bike and Ped Committee. They actually took the list and they prioritized what they thought was most important, and so it was very helpful to help us put the 20-year project list together for the transportation element. You also had a comprehensive safety action plan put together. There's 10 projects that came out of that, and these are listed here. And some of these are now on the 6-year TIP we'll talk about in just a little bit. Financially, this is the preliminary financial analysis that has been done. It's showing just where things are at and what some of these projects are going to cost over time and how the city may expect to pay for some of it. And the GMA gives you some choices. You can choose to accommodate less growth, which is rarely chosen. You can lower the level of service standards. Sometimes that's looked at seriously. You can reduce the number and cost of projects, or you can choose to generate additional revenue. And there's different ways to do that. You can adopt transportation benefit districts. You can add projects to the transportation impact fee project list and increase base rates to generate additional revenue there. You can seek more grants and things like that.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
Mr. Como, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm not sure if people in the back can hear you. Could you, you're kind of going in and out close to the
Just
mic. I'm wondering if you could just kind of be a little bit
Just
close.
a
I
little
will
bit
try to stand closer
mic.
to the mic.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's
Sorry
all.
about that.
No worries.
So in terms of how this is all going to come together and be implemented, we're going to talk about the 6-year TIP, which is kind of the main implementation mechanism that the city will use on a regular basis. And it's, as I understand, it's relatively new for the city to have this on an annual basis, and most cities are doing it this way. What we're proposing is that the city have an annual concurrency report, and many places do this. Skagit County produces one of these. And what it's really doing is, we're not talking about a voluminous thing. It could even be just a presentation like this that your public works or a staff gives you on an annual basis as you go into the 6-year TIP process. What you're going to get is a status report on, well, what's the vehicular system look like? What's the pedestrian and bicycle system look like? What about our trail system? What about our transit system? And it can be that simple. And you're getting information to help you make more informed decisions on what kind of investments you want to make as a city. And so this report, let's just call it 10 pages, is going to, maybe have some of the maps you saw in here, some of the tables and spreadsheet kind of things. And it'll give you an indication of, well, where are the needs? Or maybe working with the planning department, where is development happening? Where do we need to connect to? What are the destinations that people want to get to? Gives you that information. It's also creating transparency for the public. They can have a better understanding of why is the city making this kind of investment decision. And so this report will be done sometime late spring, early summer as you go into the 6-year TIP process, help feed the information to the system, and it'll help you along the way. So all of this is leading up to the 6-year TIP, but there's other things that still have to be done. John and his staff are working on many other elements of the comprehensive plan, and those will all come to you in time. Ultimately, the transportation element has to be certified by the Skagit Council of Governments. Unlike other elements of the comp plan, it has to have a special approval. If you don't get that, you're not eligible for state and federal grants, so it's a really important step. As it relates to the Transportation Improvement Program, that's one of the main implementation mechanisms. And you use that to do grant writing and to go invest local funding. There's street standards that have been worked on. You're going to see those. This annual concurrency report we've just mentioned, and ultimately updating your transportation impact fee program comes with that. And that's all I have in terms of sharing information. So happy to answer questions at the moment, and then we'll talk about the 6-year TIP here coming up.
All right, thank you, and thank you, Council, for patience of letting them get through a lot of information, and I'm sure there's going to be some questions. But for the public sake, we don't operate in a vacuum necessarily. Skagit Transit, I know myself and Ms. Moulton sit on the Skagit Transit Board, and also I sit on the SCOG Transportation and SCOG. So there is a little bit of a link there that we work with that team as well. All right, Council.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
I have a couple of slide questions, and they'll be quick. One is about the freight slide. I noticed some of the darker lines that show heavier tonnages of freight being transferred go from, like, one of them's on Heart Lake Road, and it goes into town. So some of them don't, I would expect a lot of them to go through from one, the freight. Yeah, so that Heart Lake Road one is 100,000 to 300,000 tons, but it goes, okay, so the red ones do go in between, and then they sort of, some of them just sort of end where I would expect them to be continuously red. Like on the very west side of town, it turns purple before it goes back south. And then on Heart Lake Road, it sort of, or is that Havacos there, I think, between A, maybe that's where the quarry is. Okay, never mind, sorry. We don't have to talk about this.
So, yeah, the lines are just indicative of the data from DOT that classifies each route according to how much was recorded being carried.
Okay, great. And then my other question is, so we have the red, orange, and green colors. I think it would be helpful to people if we had red, yellow, and green, not only because they correspond with traffic lights, but because the orange and the red are a little bit harder to distinguish amongst. That's just...
We can certainly work on that. I will just say that yellow sometimes does not reproduce very well when it comes to documents, and it can fade out and just disappear sometimes.
Okay, understood. All right, so my next question is about multimodal transportation safety and priority. And there's that upside down pyramid that you showed us on this slide. And policy T 2.2 says city planning and budget decisions will be based on the following prioritization for different travel modes with an emphasis on safety for the most vulnerable users. But I thought I saw a point where it said they will be based on the following prioritization, which we know that's not, like you said, it's going to be very costly. It might not always be practical or feasible. So what we're saying is we'll do this to the best of our abilities, because it doesn't seem like it's going to be a slam dunk in every single case that we're going to prioritize. But are we required to do that by Washington state law?
There are some things you are required to do, like ADA, for instance.
Okay.
Every single project will have to be ADA compliant, and whether it's local, state, or federally funded. And so you will be looking at vulnerable users and accessibility no matter what. And then you will be going along the way, different modes. Not every single street is going to have a facility for every single user group. That's one of the misnomers of complete streets.
One of the what?
Misnomers.
Okay.
So it's the ability to look through a lens and saying, how can we do the best we can? You obviously can't make every single street perfect for every single user group, but you can prioritize different streets for different purposes.
Okay, and that is part of the general rubric now, more than it ever has been, the multimodal level of service. So we will be, I love the idea of the annual concurrency report just being a kind of a quick update. So thank you for getting this down to a manageable, how long the report is and your presentation. Thank you. Thanks for your slides.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of notes, and I agree with Ms. Moulton. Maybe a nice goldenrod would work in place of yellow. But that can be an accessibility thing, too, if colors are too close together. The truck route list on page 22 of the document doesn't quite match the list that's in our code, and I was wondering if you are proposing changes to that list, or if there's just some other reason that they don't match up. And that page in the document also says, it is the policy of the city that trucks follow the truck routes. I think it would be helpful to cite to the code, because especially over the past many years, we've had lots of policies, some of which are unwritten, some of which are in a drawer someplace, but that one's in the code. And so I think that makes sense to provide the provenance of that. SR 20 and Reservation Road seems to have a lot of accidents. And that's just my read of the news, especially during the summer. It seems to me that you're going up a hill headed eastbound, and trucks come to a stop and have a real difficult time getting going again, and so you've got a big speed differential between the lanes. At one point in the past, I know WashDOT had a corridor plan for Highway 20 between Sharps Corner and the Dwayne Barronson Bridge that would have reduced or eliminated all those intersections. I wonder if that plan is part of their formal planning, if it is in a drawer someplace, if they're planning to actually do that, because it seems like there are some opportunities to provide the connectivity in that corridor, but reduce the number of intersections, maybe increase throughput, but also avoid some of those collisions. And does that need to go into our transportation planning, or can it remain in WashDOT's?
I think that you're referring to a plan that DOT had done in the past that I think is considered obsolete, and DOT actually recommended striking that from the goal and policy language.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was their recommendation, to remove that reference in the goals and policies. So I don't think that there is a current plan for grade separation, if that's what you're suggesting in terms of removing intersections.
Yeah, well, especially at Reservation Road, there could be some options to use some of the other intersections, the roundabout at Swinomish, that kind of thing, to get around there. I don't know precisely what that looks like. It's just, it seems to be a problem intersection given that it's got the hill right in front of it.
So the map I've got here is from the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, and this, of course, this section of road that you're referencing is identified as eligible for safety improvements. Where you find the money to do something like that, you can go to the federal government right now with US DOT Safe Streets and Roads for All grants, and we'll talk about that in a minute with the 6-year tip. There's a couple projects. It's not this one, but you would have to work with the state. And the state actually is not an eligible applicant for that particular grant funding source.
The projected LOS that you've got there for 2045 is a lower level of service at Christensen Road than at Reservation Road,
Whoops.
which is surprising to me given my experience at Reservation Road.
Yeah. Remember, this is a model.
Right.
Inputs equal outputs. It's an analytical tool, and like I said, I think more than anything, because the current situation doesn't show any of these intersections having issues at the moment, over time, keeping an eye on them is important. So every year, and again, going into the 6-year tip and having this information, that's where your staff is going to be able to help you understand what the current situation is, or even looking over the horizon a little bit. And remember, this is a 20-year planning horizon. We're going to be doing this again in 10 years. That's the GMA cycle.
Yeah. For near-term stuff, 12th and K does not excite me, and I've expressed this before, about doing a traffic light or a roundabout just 2 blocks away from an existing traffic light. Is there an alternative that doesn't involve changing the street? Is there an alternative that involves just right turn only or something like that during certain hours, whatever, something that avoids a couple $1 million expense at that intersection?
I can't really speak to an engineering fix for the current situation. I think, honestly, it really becomes a vehicle capacity issue that you have to do something about if you expect it to operate better. Or you can change the level of service standard, which GMA allows you to do. You can lower it. It doesn't solve the problem. It solves your headache, but it doesn't solve the problem from a capacity standpoint.
Yeah. I think we need to put into the plan, when we talk about the concurrency report, annual deadline, maybe just in front of presentation of the tip, so that it's useful for
Yeah, that's
analyzing
the
projects.
intent.
Okay, good. And then different streets, I think, in different neighborhoods deserve different street standards. Is that our current thinking?
We've actually been working on street standards with public works staff and planning staff, and there's several different standards for different types of streets, and we are aware that different parts of town have expressed interest in having different standards. So we're working with your staff on all of that.
I think you're aware that sometimes neighborhoods don't want sidewalks.
Yep, we've heard that loud and clear.
And so those neighborhoods, I think, need to have a different adopted standard so that some development project doesn't come along and...
We are working with your staff to try to get there with the standards and make sure everybody is as happy as they can be.
Okay, good. And then finally, in the funding section of the document, I think it may give an artificially rosy view of where we might be able to find funding. So for instance, it says, well, you can raise property taxes 1% a year. That doesn't keep up with inflation. So in my view, that's not new funding.
It's listed as an option. It's one of the tools you have available in the toolbox. And so the city can make the choices that it wishes to over time. There's a whole menu.
Right. My point is that that's not new money. It is similarly with REIT. We've already adopted REIT, so it's also not new money. It's money we can rely on, but also all general revenue we can rely on. And so I don't think we ought to give ourselves the impression that there are really a lot of funding sources available for this. I'm especially concerned that there may not be federal money available near term.
I will say that it's probably wiser to not bank on federal money for a while.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. McDougall.
Thank you for the presentation, and definitely a shout out to the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee for their work. I was looking at table 10A and B, and actually, if you wouldn't mind flipping to the map that has basically all the green routes, the walking and biking routes. Yeah, thank you. Are table 10A and 10B, are they basically the same table but split across 2 pages?
You're talking about the tables from the, I'm sorry, I don't have the packet
that's
tables.
Right.
So in the packet.
Yeah, in the packet, all the projects that are basically this.
So yeah, they're 2 tables, and they're combined city and DOT projects. The DOT ones are just at the bottom.
Okay. And how, I was just trying to interpret how it's sorted. Is it sorted by, like the BPOC folks helped prioritize these, is it basically sorted by how they prioritized it, or is it
It
sorted?
is, actually. The
Okay.
way that it's presented is their
First row is their top
their
recommendation.
recommendations based on a number of things, and they actually took a pretty practical approach, I would say.
Okay.
So, it's a list, and it's always subject to change. And what I'll say is what you're going to see in the 6-year tip, there are projects from that list in the 6-year tip. It doesn't go in rank order, because even if you sort it in a particular way, it may not be a good fit for a particular grant funding source. And so you want to go after the one that's most competitive. And so you go find that one in the list. It may not be the top project.
Okay. Got it. And then the project number is not a ranking.
The
That's-
project numbers refer to the location on the map here.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini?
There was a couple strategies and policies in here to kind of address speeding and unsafe driving, which I know was brought up earlier as an issue that we see citywide. And I was just happy to see that there's a lot proposing roundabouts, traffic calming devices, which I feel like is something that our council has done a good job of kind of getting ahead of in different areas. And then there was also something that I thought was a good idea, which was kind of a citywide travel awareness campaign to kind of have drivers expect to see, as we make the changes that we implement, to expect people to see more people walking and biking and, rolling across the roadway, for lack of a better term. I just had a question. There's a lot of interest in public input. And so there is still an opportunity. Could you share how folks could provide input should they be reading this transportation plan and want to continue to provide input?
Sure. Well, as it comes to you in the coming weeks and months, there will be opportunities for that. But this has already been subject to quite a lot of public input with all the different public engagement that's taken place over the entire course of the comprehensive plan. So we've been at a number of events and taken input from the citizens. We were here, I can't remember when, a little while back at the big open house and heard from a lot of people. We actually had these maps on display. We've worked with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We've been to the Planning Commission. We'll come back to you and have more dialogue. So people will have an opportunity to review this, make comments, and continue.
Thank you.
I should also just say that the map that's on the screen is from the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. That also had public engagement as part of it.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Cleveland-McGrath?
Thank you. I just want to say thank you very much for these maps. This is incredibly helpful. The various maps with the various information, I think this is the most clear and articulate or well-articulated kind of explanation of what our city looks like, where our challenges are, where we're excelling. And so this is incredibly helpful as we're looking at projects and development throughout our community. There's kind of 70 or so projects that number is kind of listed as identified projects. Could you speak, well.
That was just for active transportation.
For active transportation, okay. But that being said, could you speak to at what point we'll kind of do a deep dive of those 70 projects? Obviously not all grants kind of fit with the project, so do we try to simplify it down to 20 to 30 projects that we put in our capital facilities plan, kind of, and that might be a question for Mr. Rayum. Just what's your plan moving forward to kind of address and do a deep dive of those active transportation projects that have been identified so far?
So every year we'll come back to do the transportation improvement program. We'll usually have a pretty good idea what the grant cycle is, and so each year we'll be looking to adjust which of those 70 projects are more likely to help us get funding. We do have our own local funding too for sidewalk improvements and ADA ramps, so we are kind of trying to find projects that we can do multiple things in one spot, basically like Commercial Avenue. I think South Commercial is a good example, 120 ADA ramps, and in one corridor, so we're just going to hit all of those, and that's like half of them. But so I don't know if that answers your question, but it's, for the most part, like there's 70. I mean, they're almost everywhere. So like we'll try to partner that with other things that we're trying to accomplish, or if there's a development comes in, it's like, hey, there's a safety action, improvement that needs to happen in your frontage. It just helps all of us communicate about where those improvements are needed. We could try to do a deep dive and go through 70 different locations.
I just think it looks overwhelming, right, for the public to see. And so to understand that, while these have been identified as our weak points or places for improvement, we've got to be pretty thoughtful and agile to address year to year what we can actually address.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it'll be bite-sized, that we can get at. I think, though, just to, am I out of time? I just want to say that I think the city has done a great job with overlays and sidewalks and ADA ramps and everything else. At least Chris even kind of mentioned that to me, like, you guys aren't behind the curve at all when it comes to especially our size city, so.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
Thank you. I really appreciate, I think as Ms. Cleland McGrath said, the graphs, the showing of where the possibilities are for us. And I think to the point that you were making in putting out what are the possibilities of the things that need work on, as we look at the revenue sources, as they may fluctuate, opportunities for greater intermodal transportation uses. I think that that's part of what's important to us as a council, and probably in cities across the country, trying to figure out how to get people moving as efficiently as possible. And so I really appreciate that, and just really wanted to comment to say that the intermodal part of working with the existing structures and possibly partnering to make things happen is really just where I think any city that's doing the due diligence to try to maximize use of those dollars for the greater good of the community, it's just where it is. And I think as much as we may want to look down to 30 years from now, 30 years from now assumes that the current conditions will continue. What I'm always interested in is, even though we may project given the current conditions, what we do know is that life is truly fluid. Opportunities go in and out. What was good then is no longer good. And then there are new things to come up. So, but I really do appreciate this, because it really gives us the basis and the beginning points of trying to decide where is the best use of those dollars that we have, which are always limited. So, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So we're gonna talk about
okay.
the 6-year.
We do have
over
it.
yet.
We do have it asterisked on our schedule. On somebody in the chamber. Come on forward.
Oh.
And again, state your name and city you live in for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Ursula and I live in Anacortes. So the teen demographic, I think, would really like to have a say in the public transportation. I think a lot of teens don't utilize it because they don't know how. So I was wondering if there was a way that you plan to reach out to younger audiences and let them know what you're changing and get their feedback on how transportation, specifically downtown, and then back up to the high school and home, would be changed for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Give it a shot.
Okay, so that's a great question. And I appreciate you bringing that up. So I can think of a couple different ways, and I think some of the goals and policies actually start to get at some of that in things like talking about safe routes to school and trying to work with the school district on partnerships on getting information out there. There's a lot of information and goal and policy language on encouragement and education. as it relates to the transportation system. Skagit Transit is doing a lot of work. They're actually making proposals to make some changes to some of the routes that serve Anacortes to make it a little bit more efficient. So there's different ways that that can be addressed in terms of making sure that the information that people are looking for can be obtained. And we can certainly put you in touch with some of these organizations if you're interested.
Thank you. Mr. Ram, looks like you were going to round this thing out, or?
We just wanted to give you a quick primer on the transportation improvement program that's on the screen, and then it's going to come back for a public hearing in 2 weeks because I can't come here next week.
So I'll make this really quick. But this is really a critical piece of what you're going to be making decisions about in terms of where you want your transportation investments to go. And so the city has just recently used this kind of mechanism on an annual basis, and we've already talked about the notion of an annual concurrency report. Next year, you won't have to hear all this stuff from me. Your staff will produce a report that'll have most of the guts of this, at least the relevant information, to help you look at something like this. What you see up top are the kind of programmatic things like ADA compliance, pavement management, and sidewalk repair and bikeway program. Those are programmatic. Those are funded by local dollars, and you get to make all the choices about how that money is going to be used. But your staff is going to provide that annual report telling you, hey, we have these opportunities in X, Y, and Z locations. Let's go do this. Maybe we have a sewer or water repair project, and by the way, when we go put that back together, let's make sure it's ADA compliant, or maybe there's a sidewalk or a bikeway that goes in with that. We're going to maximize our taxpayer dollars and efficiency and get the most bang for the buck. So from there, you go down and there's individual projects listed, and what you're trying to do is help the public understand that the 6-year TIP is not a wish list. It's a strategic planning document, and only the most important projects that the city has a good chance of getting funded should go on this document. And so you see it's broken down into columns. You got funded and unfunded. So the first 3 years, you're typically showing the funded projects, or where you're trying to program funding, or where you think you have a really excellent grant funding candidate. So you put those on the higher portion of the 6-year TIP. As you get to the outer years and there's less funding available, or you don't know where the funding is going to come from, you can still put projects on there, but you want to make sure it's understood by the public that we don't know yet where the money might come from. It's an important project, and we're going to look for grant opportunities, but we're going to show you that there's an unknown funding source. It's on the priority list. We think there's opportunities. And what you see here in the red text, these are all indicative of kinds of grants that might be available for some of these projects. There's various, some are annual, some are biennial, some are one-time shots. So there's all sorts of things going on here. I'll just use one example, 12th and K. That's the intersection that's currently not meeting the adopted level of service standard. So GMA says, okay, well, city, what are you going to do about that? Well, we'll put it on the 6-year TIP. It's a priority. We've made an investment. Your staff was able to go to the Skagit Council of Governments and get $500,000 to determine a feasibility study to determine whether it's going to be a signal or a roundabout or what can be done there. It's on the state highway, so you have to go through an intersection control evaluation process. That's required. Doesn't matter if you want to or not. And then that money will help determine what's going to happen with this kind of a project. And then from there, you go for the construction money afterwards. Other projects, got some good grant funding candidates on here. You've just had this comprehensive safety action plan completed. There's 2 projects from that safety plan on this 6-year TIP. That is it's number 7 and 8, Oaks Avenue. I'm sorry, this is the old table. There's another table, you'll see it next time. Project number 8 is now commercial, and they're both grant funding candidates from the Safety Action Plan. And there's US DOT Safe Streets and Roads for All grant funding opportunity for the city. So good chance you can go after that money. They're very expensive projects. It's a good opportunity to take advantage of because that money's not going to be around for very much longer. Next year is probably the last funding year for that program. So trying to take advantage of it now is a good idea. So again, that's the purpose of this document. This is how it's set up, trying to make it useful for both the city as an investment mechanism, but also the public to understand how the money is invested and why.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
So this spreadsheet or anything like it isn't in our packet yet, so will you send it to us earlier than the next packet at which it would appear so that we can study it in advance? I think that would be helpful because there's a lot going on in the spreadsheet, but also because sometimes when we get a lot of projects in a big document, you know, that each individual project doesn't get the attention that it might want. And an example of that is, I think it's the safety plan that we recently adopted. It's got those hawk signals in downtown that I'm quite certain we do not want to do, but they're part of the plan and they're priced accordingly. I think they're also reflected in this document. I think we would want to take those out. I don't think we want to do that. I think we want to keep track of these projects and make sure that the project that gets put in the documents are the projects we really do want to do upon contemplation of the features of the project. You know, the 12th and Commercial Roundabout is a good example that we narrowly avoided spending almost $8 million on, right? After almost 6, 7, 8 years of working on it. So we need to do something different than we have done in the past that way, and I think more study of these things by council as they come up will help.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
Thank you. So we'll get it in our packet, and then will it also be maybe on the city website? So will we have this is part of the public hearing? Oh, yes, thank you.
We have not started the public hearing. Yeah, this was just a primer to educate you guys on what we've done with the transportation stuff, but it'll start not next Monday, but the Monday after that will be the first public hearing.
Right.
But I'll send this to you guys tomorrow.
Sure.
I have an updated copy of this. This isn't even the current one. We just wanted to give you an example of what it should look like.
Right, thank you, and I appreciate that. I'm wondering when the public can see it in order that they can comment on it, so they can look at these different projects too, so they have a heads up as well. Would that be by them looking at our agenda packet from the city website?
That was the plan, yeah.
Okay.
I don't have a website for this or anything, so.
Sure. I wonder, okay, well, maybe I can talk offline to someone who's doing the website. I mean, maybe a link to it or something. I mean, it'd be nice if, anyway, this is an offline discussion that we can have, because I would love for the public, as a member of the public, I would love to see this before it comes up. So in addition to in the council packet, I think there's ways that we can put it out there on the website. And I'm not asking you to do that, but we'll figure it out.
I think just real quick too, back to Walters, I know we need to get this over with, but I agree with you. This is the opportunity where it's like, well, I don't want a hawk signal. You know, if the whole council's like, why did you put a hawk signal in this project? Because each one of these is going to have a sheet, and hopefully these are looking okay. But those are the good ones to show you, like a.
That's a good one.
Okay. But anyways, this is where you're going to get details about what it is. And so every year we'll go revisit what it is we're committing to in these set of projects or when we add new ones. And that's the best time for you guys to say something. Like if you don't want a roundabout, say that because after that we go to design. And once it's in design, that's not a good time to change.
And before the capital facilities plan.
Yeah, it does. This will go into the capital facilities plan, but this will obviously, it's going to be coming in June,
right.
and then we usually capital facilities plan later in summer.
That's it for me, unless you have more questions.
All right. Well, I think appreciate the presentation. Good discussion and more to follow. All right, we'll move on to item 6E. Thanks for patience on that one. The next item is Port of Anacortes Intergovernmental Disposition of Property and Property Use Agreement. This is a discussion item with possible action. And Ms. Swetnam, I didn't say intergovernmental long enough.
I only have like 50 slides, so it shouldn't
okay.
be too bad.
But whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you, Mayor Miller, members of council, and members of the audience. We're also joined by some representatives of the ports team, so they'll get an opportunity to share information about this, and as I understand, are available to answer questions. So the agreement that's in your packet is an agreement between the Port of Anacortes and the City of Anacortes I've got a couple of slides here just to go through, hopefully quickly, the terms of the agreement, and then I have a series of maps. So maps are coming. So the term of this agreement is from execution until all of the anticipated transactions are completed. There are a number of components of this agreement. It's a little bit complicated. There's a lot of pieces, but there will be a boundary line adjustment. There's a right-of-way dedication, an amendment to the easement for Market Street, a license for street amendment, and then the triangle property transfer. I'm going to step through those quickly. So the boundary line adjustment that's discussed in the agreement is an application that the port submitted to the city, subject to city approval, and I believe city staff are working on that right now. The right-of-way dedication that's anticipated in this agreement is once that boundary line adjustment is approved by the city, the port plans to dedicate the right-of-way anticipated by Vacation Ordinance 4080. That's part of the compensation for that vacation that was granted. The Market Street easement amendment, so currently Market Street lies within an easement from the port to the city, and so that's going to need to be realigned. There are a couple of points I wanted to make on that process. The parties are going to have to amend the easement document itself. The port is going to pay to the city a mitigation payment, that's what it's called in the agreement, of $20,190, and that's to compensate the city for moving that street from port-owned property with an easement to city-owned property with an easement that's currently used for parks purposes, in the future will be used for street purposes. The port is also going to design and construct a buffer next to the Altair Americas Park. The purpose of that was to provide just a buffer between the street and that memorial park. The port's also going to relocate the trees within the existing green area, and then also pay the city $2,000 to move the driftwood giraffe sculptures from within the existing green area to a place that the city selects.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
Got a question on this bullet point, Market Street easement amendment. Sure. Market Street today, the ground is owned by the port?
Correct.
And so we hold the easement?
Correct.
But we are going to be giving them an easement or giving them the ground?
No, they're going to be, so the maps will probably make this a little bit clearer because it's a bit of a quilt. So the Market Street's going to be on top of at least the portion that this discussion of the mitigation payment talks about. It's going to be on top of property right now that's owned by the city, but it's going to be obviously reused for right-of-way purposes because it will be a street. Does that make sense?
But currently Market Street is a city easement on port ground.
Correct.
And now it's, part of it is going to be a port easement on city ground?
Nope, no port easement. Nope, it'll be
So how
just,
do you achieve it by just amending an easement?
Those are the logistics and the mechanics that are going to be worked through with the port's attorney and city staff to get those easements updated.
Okay, so then maybe it might not take explicitly the form of an amendment to the easement.
Correct. It's not going to be just a redrafting of that easement. We're going to have to reimagine that document with all of these transactions in mind. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
So the agreement also grants a license by the city to the port to do construction activity within the new Market Street area. And then the last component is the triangle property transfer. So the city will sell the triangle property to the port for $15,246. And that amount was generated, the port had an appraisal done, and the city staff have reviewed the port's appraisal and found that that was reasonable. So the maps. So this is an aerial image of you can see the kind of weird intersection of Market Street and our avenue, and this is sort of generally where all of these components will come into play. I thought this Exhibit G of the boundary line adjustment area in the port's materials was helpful, but I colored on it to make it more helpful for myself and hopefully for you all. So there's kind of 4 different triangles here. And the olive green triangle here is the area that was vacated by Ordinance 4080. And to remind you all, the value of that, which again was done by an appraisal, was $100,000. And that was paid for by the port, or will be paid for by the port, in a combination of dedicating to the public the teal triangle, which had a value of, I believe, $40,000, and they could use half of that value as compensation for the vacation area, and then the anticipated payment of $80,000 for the remaining purchase price. So that teal area is the area that's going to be dedicated to the public when Market Street moves that direction, if you guys can see my cursor. This little pink triangle is the triangle property, which the port will be buying from the city. That's the $15,000 purchase price. And then this brown, gray, looks more brown, but it was gray initially, area is the mitigation area that I was just talking about. So currently that area is part of that park where the giraffes live. And so that's open green space for the public, and it will now be, this gray area will be where the new Market Street is going to live. And so the compensation to the city for that is $20,190. We came up with that amount by using the price per square foot that the port's appraiser came up with for the pink triangle, and then we cut that in half because it will still be city property. The city will just have limited uses of it. It will no longer be available for parks purposes. It will be limited for street purposes. So we had a good discussion with the port about that, and I believe came to a reasonable solution there.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Is there any kind of guideline of parks property is worth more or less than road property? Because we know we have a great amount of parks in this town, but we're losing a chunk right now. And so is there sort of a hierarchy?
Yeah, that's a great question, which we all talked a lot about internally, and do not have a clean answer for that. I think the fact that this gray area is currently used for parks purposes, but the city owns it in fee simple. So in other words, the city could do whatever it wanted with it, within the confines of existing plans and code. But moving forward, it will be the location of a street. So while, the fee simple kind of has an open universe of possibilities that area could be used for, and now it will be limited to just street purposes.
Right, and obviously, I mean, this is a safety improvement, right? Yeah, I just hate to lose park property and not have it mitigated by having an equal amount of park property somewhere else.
Yeah.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
I think effectively we are achieving that mitigation because you'll lose this oddly shaped portion here and then the triangle. But the port's development plan includes this very nice plaza at the end of 9th Street. And that's not going to be a city park. It's going to be owned by the port. But it will serve that park purpose. So I'm very comfortable with that as a result.
And I think that's part of, this is sort of one piece of an overall plan that I know the port's been working on for a long time to put park space along the waterfront and move Market Street over. And I will say that we had a really fruitful discussion with the port about having an improved buffer with green space and plantings between the new location of the street and the Altair Americas Park. And so I think part of the idea is that there's also going to be some improvement to that area to make it more aesthetically appealing to users of the Altair Americas Park too. So then I just wanted to kind of, because there's a number of different payments here, I just wanted to highlight each of these separately. So there's the triangle property purchase, which again is that little pink area. That's $15,246. There is the mitigation payment, which, as I said, is $20,190, and those funds are to be used for improvements to the Altair Americas Memorial Park buffer. And then the port will also pay the city $2,000 for art relocation, which, we asked them if they wanted to move it themselves, and they said, no, it's better that the city do it, which I can't say that I blame them on that. So, and that $2,000 figure came from Parks Director John Lunsford, and he thought that that was a reasonable amount that would allow the city to do the work to relocate those sculptures. So those are my points on the agreement. I'm happy to turn it over to the port if they have any additional comments, and I think we're both willing to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. And just as port's coming up here, I'd like to thank both staffs there was a lot of work. It's a very complex transaction that followed the council's vacation of the property, and as we move forward with the event center and the West Basin project, this is an important element, but it's complicated because there's lots of different pieces. So over to you.
Good evening, and I'll just reiterate what you were just saying, Mayor Miller, that I wanted to thank city staff and city leadership on behalf of the port for working on this issue for since 2017, I can actively remember. So this represents a pretty big milestone. So appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
All right, council questions? All right, it's the color map that does it.
I know.
It took that map for me to figure this one out, so.
It took that map for me to figure it out too.
With the colors. All right, council, your pleasure.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. McDougall?
Looks like it's pretty straightforward. Thank you all both for, and staffs for putting it together. And I move we authorize Mayor Miller to execute the intergovernmental disposition of property and property use agreement with the Port of Anacortes as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McDougall and second by Mr. Walters to execute the intergovernmental disposition of property as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Hebeck?
Yes.
Mr. Fantini?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So our next item is item 7. 7A is an executive session. The council will now meet in executive session to discuss potential real estate transaction as allowed by RCW 4230-110. The council will be in executive session for 30 minutes and anticipate returning at 8:55, but no action will be taken, and there's no further agenda items on that. So we'll move to executive session at this time. All right, City Council's extending the executive session for 15 minutes. We should adjourn from that at approximately 9:10 p.m. right, the council was continuing an executive session for 10 more minutes, so 9:20. right, the city council has concluded its executive session, and there's being no further business before the council, I'll adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you.